Hello factory builders, in this video I'll show you a very efficient way of building the factory. This approach allows not to reconstruct the factory over and over and not to remove manufacturing buildings that was already built. Using this approach you will save a lot of time and your factory will be very compact on the plane. So let's get started. What we start with is a conveyor belt which is producing iron ingots, and what we do is placing constructors along the conveyor belt using splitters. These constructors will produce iron plates or iron rods. Let's say we have a conveyor belt producing 60 iron ingots per minute and 3 constructors. First is making iron plates, the second and third iron rods. The key point here is that we will not put plates and rods on the same conveyor belt. Each type of resource will be placed on its own layer, one above the other. We put plates on layer 1 and rods on layer 2. For now we just store all resources in the storages. As you can see, resources of each layer are stored in its own storage. Now we want not only store iron plates and iron rods, but also use them to construct new things. We place 2 new constructors that will produce screws and consume part of iron rods. Now we store 80 screws per minute and 10 iron rods per minute instead of 30, because 20 rods are now used in making screws. This is how it looks like in the game. Our constructors produce iron plates and iron rods. Each type of resource is located on its own vertical layer. These layers stretch along new constructors producing screws, and they take necessary resources from certain layer. Screws constructors take iron rods from layer 2. Here you see a lot of constructors, but on our scheme there are only 2. As you can see, all resources that was not used all moved to the storages. These constructors produce new type of resources, screws, and it will be placed on the third layer of the factory. Let's get back to the top here. On this scheme there is one thing that may seem wrong. Let's have a closer look at these constructors. Shouldn't the splitter split incoming 30 iron rods equally? Of course it should. This is how it should look like at the first place. 30 iron rods splits equally at first splitter. The first constructor gets 15 iron rods per minute. At the second splitter 15 iron rods per minute should be splitted equally, and 7.5 iron rods should go to the second constructor and the other 7.5 iron rods to the storage. But the fact is, the first constructor can consume only 10 iron rods per minute, so 5 iron rods per minute will be stored inside constructor's inner storage every minute. And after 40 minutes, inner storage will be fully filled, because the maximum amount of rods that the constructor can keep in its inner storage is 200. So after 40 minutes, constructor will be fully filled, and it won't be able to get more than it requires each minute. And it will take only 10 iron rods per minute, as it's shown on the left side. So I prefer to fully fill all my constructors and assemblers, which makes it easier to count how much resources I need to use. For that we can use resources stored before in our storages and not to wait 40 minutes. So keep in mind that in this guide all constructors and assemblers are fully filled with resources. The main resource in the Satisfactory is physical space on the ground. I've been through many situations when I need to put a new constructor, but I don't have a place for it. So to transfer resources, I had to build awkward heaps of conveyor lifters like that. An approach described in this video solves the problem. First level of factory will always expand in this direction, just like the second level. So we just need to have free space in this direction, and in this direction for the storages. To build this sure you'll have enough space, I recommend to find the edge of the mountain and build a big platform for the factory across the abyss using foundations. So, this row of constructors is the first level of a factory. It produces first level resources, iron rods and iron plates. This row of constructors is the second level of a factory, and screws are second level resources. Now let's build third level of factory. It produces third level resources, reinforced iron plates and rotors. For now let's just only add an assembly producing reinforced iron plates. To produce 5 reinforced iron plates per minute, we need to take 60 out of 120 screws per minute and 30 out of 60 iron plates per minute. Now I store reinforced iron plates, but half less plates and rods. This is how it looks like in the game. We have 3 conveyor belts with 3 types of resources. Assemblers take resources they need from any of 3 layers, and then they put made resources on new layers. Reinforced iron plates are put on layer 4. Now as we have 3 layers of a factory, we can see they all have something similar. Each factory level has an input conveyor belt providing resources from all previous levels. Level 3 takes level 2 and level 1 resources, level 2 uses level 1 resources. The only exception here is level 1. We might say that it consumes level 0 resources, iron ingots, but I wouldn't do so, because we don't use ingots anywhere at next levels. Also, each level has an output conveyor belt that provides resources of its level and all previous levels. Level 1 outputs first level resources, level 2 outputs level 1 and level 2 resources, and level 3 outputs level 1, level 2 and level 3 resources. Let's look at it from a different point of view. Let's imagine there is a single conveyor belt that carries different resources to the storages. Each type of resource inside the main conveyor belt is moving at its own layer. Remember that in real life layers are located one above the other. This is just schema for better understanding of the concept. Along the way, resources encounter different levels of a factory. At each level, resources may be transformed to another resources. Let's imagine that each level may add pipes that transform one resource to another. At level 2 there are only one pipe that converts iron rods to screws. If we add 3 pipes at level 2, 30 rods will be converted to 120 screws. Then these resources will move toward level 3. Let's say that we want to make reinforced iron plates. So on level 3 we use a pipe that converts screws and iron plates to reinforced iron plates. This pipe takes half resources from layer 1 and layer 3 and generates resources of layer 4. After all levels, we eventually have 5 reinforced iron plates, 60 screws, 15 rods and 30 plates, just as at original schema. But what if we don't need to produce third level resources anymore? And also, I want to store all resources that was used to produce them. All we need to do is just remove the pipe at level 3. All resources that was taken by the pipe will just move to the storages and be collected, or used in next levels. What we actually do on a real schema is just turning off this assembler. What we do in the game is removing this conveyor belt connecting the assembler and main conveyor belt. Look how easy it is to free up resources that was involved in producing high-level resources. Before using this approach, I had to build schemas like that to produce reinforced iron plates. And if I wanted to turn off the reinforced iron plates assembler, all these conveyors became useless, and all resources involved here got stuck. I had to use conveyor lifters to transport resources somewhere else, and I had to find place for new conveyor belts. Using this schema, we don't have to do anything to release resources we use to produce high-level resources that we don't want to make anymore. And if in the future we need to make reinforced iron plates again, we just connect assembler back to the main conveyor belt like that. Important thing here is that main conveyor belt and connection conveyor belt must be of same type. Otherwise, splitters won't split resources equally and calculations will be wrong. For the demonstration, we have a storage full of resources, the splitter and 2 storages. We connect first storage with MK4 conveyor belt and the second with MK1. Expected result here is that we store much more resources in first storage, so be sure to use same conveyor belts on your factory. So, there are 2 key advantages of the approach. We will always have place to add new buildings, and we always can turn off any building and release resources that was used in it. There is one more key advantage that follows from the second one. As we can easily turn off constructors and assemblers, we can also change incoming resources and consequently output resources. Let's say we have 6 assemblers producing rotors. What if now I want to produce reinforced iron plates instead of rotors? I switch type of some first level constructors from iron rod to iron plate, and type of assemblers from rotor to reinforced iron plate. Also, I turn off some constructors I don't need anymore. Before using the approach, if I had 6 rotor assemblers and I wanted to make reinforced iron plates instead, I had to turn off rotor assemblers, turn on 6 reinforced iron plate assemblers, and redirect incoming resources from one assemblers to another. So I had to have twice more assemblers, which takes twice more physical space on the ground, and also redirect resources from one part of the factory to another. So, third key advantage of the approach is compactness of the factory and the ability to switch type of the constructor building. Let's have a closer look at this key advantage. Switching type of first level constructors, we don't need to change input resource type, because for iron rod and iron plate constructors there is the same input resource type, iron ingots. What differs here is the amount of incoming iron ingots. We need 15 ingots for the rod constructors and 30 ingots for plate constructors. Before using the approach, I had to combine conveyor belts in a way that iron rod and iron plate constructors to get different amount of incoming iron ingots. And if I switch iron rod constructor to make iron plates, it won't get enough resources. Using the approach, as we have a single iron ingots conveyor belt and all constructors are fully filled, the amount of incoming ingots changes automatically. What we should do manually is to disconnect constructor from the main conveyor belt first before switching its type. Otherwise, iron rod or iron plate will go to wrong layer and the constructor on the next level expecting to get one resource type will get another. The resource will be stuck and there won't be another way of removing it except recreating the connecting conveyor belt. This refers to any factory level. When changing constructor's type, first switch its output connecting conveyor belt to another layer. Now let's quickly review adding new types of resources at new levels to our factory. To add assembler producing rotors to level 3, we need to add 5 rod constructors and 4 screw constructors. Also, we have to increase the amount of incoming iron ingots from 135 from previous schema to 210. Here's a little tip. If your current conveyor belt can carry that much ingots, you can temporarily use second incoming conveyor belt like that. Let's finally add new level to our factory, level 4. To make 2 modular frames per minute, we add 2 plate constructors and 1 reinforced iron plate assembler. Now let's add one more level, level 5. To make 5 versatile frameworks per minute, we add 3 rod constructors, 2 screw constructors, 1 reinforced iron plate assembler, and 2 modular frame assemblers. Also, we need 60 steel beams per minute. As you could notice, the approach on this video describes an hierarchy of resources at first place produced from iron ingots, but what if I need to get other types of resources that wasn't made on our factory, but are required here? We use special conveyor belt that is connected to layer 6 right before level 4 of our factory and is carrying all other types of resources. When I added the outsourced conveyor belt to the factory with steel beams on it, I realized that there will be more different outsourced resources to add, and it will be an overhead to make a separate layer for each resource. So I decided to stop making new layers and to put all outsourced resources on layer 6. Just as all other resources produced on factory except those that are located on the first 5 layers. Having different resources on same layer, I need a way to pick certain resource for certain assembler. For that, I use Smart Splitter and simply program it to pick certain resource. I had a lot of practice with this approach, and I can say that keeping 6 layers is reasonable, because the more layers you have, the more time you waste to make new level or add new building. Having Mark IV conveyor belt was enough to store all resources I needed on layer 6. First 3 layers of the factory have many resources because they are frequently used on higher levels. Starting from layer 4, we produce few resources, because, for example, spending 60 screws, we produce only 5 reinforced iron plates. Screws are the most commonly used resource, and potentially all screws required may not fit on layer 3. If that's the case, I recommend to transfer reinforced iron plates and rotors from layer 4 and 5 to layer 6, and use layer 4 and 5 for screws, or maybe plates and rods if you need to. If you like, you can still build more layers, especially since update 4 came out. It's extremely easy to hover high and build new layers using hover pack. Maybe one of the reasons why I stopped on layer 6 was inconvenience of building high layers using jetpack. When I decided to have only 6 layers, I also changed the way I store resources. Before, I had certain storage for each resource, but now, as I have many resources on layer 6, I started to use smart splitters to pick certain resource, and programmable splitters to store several resources in the same storage container. To sum up, the outsourced conveyor belt is needed to add resources to the factory that was not produced using resources from this factory. On this factory we produce only resources based on iron. But this approach can be applied to other types of resources. Let me show you a mini factory based on copper. Here I have a row of constructors producing wire. This is the first level of mini factory. Produced wire move along the second level of mini factory. It consists of row of constructors consuming wire and producing cable. And all wire that was not consumed on second level of a factory moves forward to be stored, just like at the main factory. On copper factory, we might add level 3 and so on to produce, for example, supercomputers. But on this version of mini factory, I faced the problem of not having enough space to add new levels. That's why it's important to build a big platform over the abyss first, before making the factory. Now let's get back to schemas and adding new resources. There are level 4 resources we haven't covered yet. Smart planting and motor. To add smart planting we don't need to add more buildings because we have enough resources. We just take 2 of 4 reinforced iron plates and 2 of 4 rotors. To add motor, let's add 5 rod constructors, 3 screw constructors and 2 rotor constructors. With this setup, we see that motor assembler works only 50% because it consumes only 5 rotors per minute instead of 10. This is very disappointing because we have exactly 10 rotors right before the splitter, and we lose half due to splitting. To avoid it, we must have twice more resources than we need before the splitter, in our case 20 rotors. To have 10 more rotors we need to add 3 motor assemblers, which actually produces 12 rotors. To make 12 rotors we need 300 screws and 60 rods. For 300 screws we need 8 screw constructors, which require 80 rods. Totally we need 140 rods, which require 10 rod constructors, which is 150 iron ingots. And this all is just to add 10 rotors that actually will be just stored. But what if I don't need to store them, and no other assemblers use them next? Why should I waste my time to add these 10 rotors that I don't even need? Of course I shouldn't, and here is a little trick for that. If we don't need to store rotors and no one next uses them, we can just cut the conveyor belt of rotors layer. Using this hack in specific situations, we can save a lot of time instead of adding more resources to the factory. Cutted lines will be marked with the X sign on the schema. Here we also use this hack with last level 3 assembler with incoming screws. Okay, let's add our first manufacturer to produce modular engine. It consumes 2 out of 5 motors per minute and all smart plantings we already have. The only new resource required is rubber. We add it to the outsourced conveyor belt. Finally, we can add last level to our factory, level 6. The only level 6 resource at the moment is adaptive control unit. One unit requires 1 heavy modular frame and other non-iron based resources. So I need to add only 1 heavy modular frame manufacturer to the factory, which also requires some non-iron based resources and 5 modular frames. As we can see from previous schema, we already have 5 modular frames per minute, so basically as adaptive control unit was the last iron based resource, I decided to turn off all buildings that I don't need for the milestone and store only adaptive control units. This is how, using one of key advantages of the approach, I easily turned off all buildings I didn't need for the current goal and freed a lot of resources. Also, I freed energy that may be used in other parts of the factory. That was the last schema I was going to show you, but during finishing this video, update 4 has came out, and it brings new things to upgrade iron-based factory. Let's use some of them one by one. There is new level 6 resource, fused modular frame. It requires heavy modular frames, aluminum casing, and nitrogen gas. Gas is a new type of resource. It is provided via pipes, just like liquids. To produce fused modular frames, we need to use new building, blender. Its feature is that it may use fluids or gas, along with common resources provided by conveyor belts. And that is a breaking change for the approach, because before buildings took all resources from one of the conveyor belts. Now, to use blender, I had to build another new huge platform under the main platform the factory stands on. Let's call new platform on the ground floor and the main platform ground floor. I choose the distance between factory floors in a way that 6 stackable pipes could fit there. If you want, you may make distance between floors bigger or double pipe stack like that. I suppose that pipes should follow main conveyor belt on the underground floor. Then it will be easy for any building to pick specific gas or fluid using pipeline junction cross. So we provided all resources to the blender and now it's making fused modular frames. Let me introduce first level 7 resource of the factory, pressure conversion cube. It is produced by assembler, which requires fused modular frames and radio control units to produce pressure conversion cubes. Finally, let's add level 8 to the factory, and first level 8 resource is nuclear pasta. It is produced by another new building, Particle Accelerator. It requires pressure conversion cubes and copper powder to make nuclear pasta. So now we're producing new level 6, level 7 and level 8 resources, but in future updates there may be more levels, so be sure to have enough space here for future levels. And also be sure you have space to build platform under your main factory. Who knows what else we will need in the future. And that's all I've got for you. Good luck, factory builders!